Okay. We are picking up now Genesis 19. Last time we did the story of Sodom and Gomorrah. And so if you can remember how that story went, began with the two angels appearing in the city of Sodom, and Lot greets them. And if you remember, what does Lot do? And it really sets up the contrast with the men of Sodom. How does Lot treat these guests when they arrive in his town?
He washes their feet.
Yeah, he has them spend the night, come stay at my house. He gives them water, takes care of their feet, and if you remember, how he treated them was very similar to what
Abraham.
is exact the way that Abraham treated these same angels and the Lord. That's a big again, that hospitality, that treatment of the stranger is one of the great signs of the righteous versus the wicked. The righteous, because the stranger is so vulnerable among them. In fact, Jesus even says that in the sheep and the goats. If you remember, he says, I was a stranger and you invited me in. And he says, if you did the least of these, my brethren, you did it to me. And to the wicked, he says, I was a stranger, you didn't invite me in, you didn't take care of me. And so the righteous, one of their signs of their righteousness is that they took care of the stranger. They welcomed them in, and they cared for them. Whereas the wicked take advantage of them and they seek to exploit them because they have no defenders. There's no one there. They will not be missed if anything happens to them, because they're far away from home. So Lot does the right thing, brings them in. When the men of the town hear about this, what happens when they hear that these two angels, these two men, are with Lot right now?
They come down and demand to have them brought out.
Yeah. So they surround, and how many were there surrounding the house?
All of them.
Isn't that crazy? If this is, I mean, it could be an exaggeration, but whatever it is, all the people, all the men, young and old, to the last man, really emphasizes the universal nature of their wickedness. It was to every last one of them that was part of this. And they say, bring them out that we may know them. And again, they're not being polite, wanting to just get to know these guys. Sit down, have a nice talk, and tell us where you're from. Tell us about your family. It's like,
Yeah.
But their intent was to use and abuse and rape them. And Lot, if you remember that distressing moment, the wickedness is so great that even righteous men do outrageous things. And that's what you see with Lot. It's such a wicked time that Lot even has to go to the point where he feels like he has to go to the point of offering his two daughters to them, so that just to keep them from harming his guests. It's a sick situation. No one should ever be put in that situation. But that's, again, highlights the evil of this time.
I have a question.
Yes, please.
Were the daughters fiancés with Lot, or were they part of the all in the crowd?
That we talked about that last time, and the reality is they would not have been. I don't think they would have been because they were not married yet. He says they were still virgins.
Yeah.
So they're betrothed. They're considered sort of betrothed, but they're not. They wouldn't have been in the same house. They wouldn't have slept over. That would not have been appropriate for them to have slept over. And this is in the middle of the night too, I believe.
Yeah.
So then the question is, were they part of that crowd?
Yeah.
And oftentimes you get people caught up in a crowd too, who are going along with the mob as well. So, but yeah, they are. That's a good question, and we're not. I'm inclined to guess maybe they were among the crowd. I mean, it was depraved.
Because they didn't agree to go with Lot.
They did not agree to go with Lot. No, they laughed at that possibility. But we have here the crowd, and so then they are groping, and Lot, to his credit, goes out to them, puts himself in harm's way. He leaves his house and confronts the crowd. And they are ready to kill him. and basically threatened to do worse to him if he doesn't get out of the way. And he's doing everything, even offering his family, offering his own life to protect these men. And they are still groping after them. This is how depraved and persistent their evil is. And the men, of course, blind them. And what happens after the angels blind the men of Sodom?
They still grope around.
They're still groping for the door. Yeah, let me if I can pull it up here. Yeah. They're groping for the door, still trying to satisfy their lusts and their vile behavior. And so then that's sufficient evidence. Remember, the whole point of this visit was to see if the outcry against Sodom was true, that charges have been brought against Sodom. So God is presented like a judge. The Lord is sort of a judge, and the charges have been made, and he's going through the process of justice, and Sodom is on trial. And when you read this story, you come away basically with the singular conclusion: burn it all down, destroy it, just destroy this place. It's irredeemable. It is a wickedness beyond repair, like we saw in the flood narrative, where it says the thoughts of man were only evil all the time, and the earth is filled with violence. So that the Lord basically says it's time to go. It's time to destroy this. God is so patient, and he is just, and he does not just destroy things based upon the evil that he sees in people's hearts, but he needs to justify his judgments so that evil is exposed and seen, so that when his judgments come, no one will look at God and say, you were unjust, but he is righteous. In fact, you look at this and you're like, God, how could you, that you marvel that God is so merciful that he waits so long before he brings his judgments upon them, but he surely does. Now, in the story, then the men say, get everyone out of here that you can. The outcry, we're going to destroy this place. Lot immediately goes to his sons-in-law and those who are about to marry his daughters, and tells them to get out with him, but they think he's joking. And then they leave. And so actually they don't really leave. He's lingering. He's not going. And you can imagine it's not easy to leave everything behind, your home, and plus he's probably he may have friends and neighbors or others that he's trying to convince, who knows, but he's lingering. He's not getting out of there. And so the angels actually have to grab him, seize him and his daughters by the hand, and bring them out, escape for their life. And then when they go, what happens with his wife, if you remember?
She looks back and
Yeah.
becomes a pillar of salt.
Yeah, she looks back and she shares in the judgment of Sodom. She's turned into a pillar of salt, or she basically, and again, her looking back is not simply that she turns and just takes a peek back there. It's this, they escape to a city, I think.
Mm-hmm.
And then she's back. Yeah. Say again, Rob?
I was going to say Zoar.
Yeah, they get to a small city. So the angels tell him get to the hills, and Lot's like, I can't handle hill living. That's city over here. Can I go there? And it's a little one. So he lets them escape to the city. And then when the sun had risen on the earth, it was the next day, and he overthrows the cities, but Lot's wife behind him looked back, and so she's out, but I think the symbolic nature of it is she's looking back, longing. She's kind of double-minded. So,
Well, wouldn't you say she was a citizen of Sodom? Because
Yeah.
Lot was a bachelor when he showed up.
yeah, she would have definitely been from Sodom. She was of the town. So I think when you look at this as a case study in God's judgment, and you ask the question about, how God will judge and how he saves. And I think there's a few lessons in this. We see it, same thing we saw with the flood narrative. When God judges, his judgment is just. And in this story, there are three categories of people that are being judged, that share in the judgment of Sodom. The first category are the wicked men of Sodom, these evildoers, these who are full on, unapologetically a part of the evil that is being done in the world, active participants in the wickedness. They are judged clearly. The second two categories, however, serve as good warnings to us. Because I mean, I don't think none of us here, unless you're living secret lives I know nothing about, I would say you would qualify in the category of the sodomites and that kind of that absolute wicked and depraved psychotic behavior. However, the other two are warnings to us, and Jesus even points to one of them, Lot's wife, as a warning to us. The others that share in the judgment are his sons-in-law. And again, were they a part of the mob? Were they leading the mob? They certainly weren't leading it. Were they there? Perhaps. Were they not? Who knows? But he points them out. They are judged. They are destroyed with Sodom, aren't they? And what was their problem?
They didn't
Why-
listen a lot. They just thought he was being funny.
Yeah, they don't take they don't think about the judgment. They don't take it seriously. Even though they're not maybe leading the charge in the rebellion of evil, they're kind of just going along and thinking that there's nothing to worry about. And so that is a big concern when we look at our country and our area, how many people live our lives with a sense of just an apathy or a joke, like there's no judgment coming. What are you worried about? There is no hell. There's no final day. They don't really believe, they don't take it seriously. And they just kind of get carried up and go along with whatever. And then the third one is Lot's wife. And that's a more serious warning, I think, and why Jesus highlights her to his disciples when he says, remember Lot's wife. And what's the lesson of Lot's wife?
Don't look back.
Yeah. He says, remember Lot's wife, whoever tries to save his life will lose it. Whoever loses life for my sake will find it. You don't put your hand to the plow and turn back. No one who puts his hand to the plow and looks back is fit for the kingdom of heaven. And so there's this idea of if those who follow Christ and to escape the judgment, there is this no looking back. It is a going forward and the warning constantly in the scriptures of being double-minded, of having, you want to follow Christ, but you also want to live like the world and you want to be a part of this world. And so there's no forsaking. It's kind of like he calls it, James calls us adulterous people. Like you get married and part of your marriage vow is forsaking all others, be faithful to each other. And so you're the guy who says, yeah, I want to get married. I love you. I want to marry and commit to you, but I also want to keep my girlfriends on the side here. It's like, no, you can't do that. That's not a marriage. And same thing with Christ. It's like, you can't serve God and money. You can't be of this world and of the kingdom. And so that's the danger that a lot of believers, we would call them nominal Christians, face, is though they may be aligned with those who are being saved, yet they are judged along with the world. So even though Lot's wife is out of the city of destruction, even though she's with those who are being saved, because she is double-minded, she shares in the judgment that's coming. It's a real stark warning for us here. But look at those who are saved. Who is saved from Sodom?
Lot and his daughters.
Yeah, Lot and his two daughters. And the question we have to ask is, what did they do to be saved?
They were relatives to Abraham.
They were. I mean, that's the one thing about those three. They were the only three people in Sodom who shared the blood of Abraham, weren't they? Lot's wife was not of the blood of Abraham, but these two daughters were. They did share through Lot. They shared. Actually, they were all not descendants of Abraham, but they were all the people in the story of salvation are descendants of Terah.
Right.
Yeah.
That's why it says these are the generations of Terah. And so, yeah, Lot is a grandson of Terah, and his daughters are great-granddaughters of Terah, and Abram's a son of Terah. You're going to find that Sarah is a daughter of Terah, and Rebecca and Rachel and Leah are all granddaughters of Terah. They're all connected. So but why are they saved in that regard? So one of the things you can see is, should Lot have perished with Sodom?
Well, he believed in what the angels were telling him, so he had faith that the Lord was sending these messengers.
Yeah. There is some faith in the man, and yet
Ultimately, it always comes down to grace. Somehow it's always going to come down to grace.
One of the points of the story was, remember, they said to him, up, take your wife and your two daughters, lest you be swept away in the punishment of the city. And then it says, but he lingered. Lot should have perished he was not heeding that warning that they told him. They told him, get out of here. And at this point, he is not.
Yeah.
And they actually seize him and drag him out of there with his two daughters, lest he share in the judgment that was coming upon that city. And so it's grace, isn't it? It's by grace. Now, Lot is a man of faith, because you can see that by the way that he does treat the angels when they arrive, just like Abram, and the way that he does believe that there's going to be a judgment. He's trying to convince his sons-in-law about this. But even so, even though he has faith, he's a weak man, and by every rights, he should have perished with Sodom as well. And then there's another reason why. The question is, why do the angels seize him and drag him out? If you remember what happened in the last chapter before this.
God promised Abraham some stuff when he was going down. How many men would, if this many men, are righteous, would you still blow them away? And so,
yeah,
there can't be any righteous men left of it, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, he's righteous, and he's not of the wicked. He's not an enemy of God. He certainly has reverence for the Lord. But yeah, it's the intercession of Abraham that saves the day here. He pleads for him. He pleads, and that's the point of that whole section. He doesn't care much about Sodom. He cares about Lot.
Yeah.
And so that's the reason that they're brought out, because of that. That's why the story will return after Lot is brought to safety. It returns to Abraham, and we're reminded of what happened the last chapter. So let's pick it up there.
Pastor, can I just say one observation that I had? Because there are times when I think, why pray for a good outcome? God will already has his will. He knows what he's going to do. But here it shows that God's mind can be changed. When he told Lot to go to the hills, and Lot pleaded with him not to, he said, okay, you can go elsewhere. So God will change his mind. It's not always firm and to be followed out always, I guess.
Yeah, I think the way that we would say it is, look, God has his plans, and he is sovereign. He works all things according to his purposes. We know that to be true. But we also know that he commands us to pray. He insists upon it. And we know that things happen because of prayer. It's very clear in the scriptures. How you want to reconcile those two doesn't matter. But the danger we have is when we draw conclusions from one section of doctrine. So when you talk about the sovereignty of God and that he is in complete control, God is in heaven, he does whatever he pleases, right? And that's true. He is completely sovereign. And when he wants to do something, he does it. Nothing can stop him. And he's always of good intent, and his will is always good. And you might want to take that, you're right, and say, well, then why bother praying, right? and just let it, if he's going to do, he's going to do. What's the point of praying? God just does what he does. And that's exactly how the Muslims feel about it, that God will do what he does. And, prayer is not something that is, other than trying to please God by praying, it's not effective in anything it does. They don't expect their prayers to be answers. They just expect God is going to do what Allah is going to do. That's not a biblical conclusion. That's a false conclusion. You're using human logic to take one doctrine and apply it. You can't do that. You look at all the scripture and say, there are things we just don't understand. I don't understand how God is completely sovereign with his perfect plans, and yet he says pray. In fact, he says ask and you will receive. And that the prayer of a righteous man avails much. There's a lot of teaching about prayer that says you better do it, and that it's powerful, and things happen because you pray. And I guarantee you, you are all here and saved because someone prayed for you. There were people pleading for you specifically. And so that's the awesome thing. Now, how that all works, we don't know, because God is behind it all. But the reality is, pray. And that's one of the lessons of the story, is like Abraham prayed. And God was not put off and annoyed by his prayer, was he?
No.
He was pleased. He entertained. Abraham stopped at 10, thinking that was sufficient. I suspect he could have gone further. God is so pleased to hear the prayers of his people, and he wants that. So you're absolutely correct. It's not so much that God changes his mind in that he is, has his mind set on something, and then he corrects, or he repents, or he in some way corrects himself, but rather he often tests us to bring out and to use us he wants us praying. He really just does. He wants us praying, and he insists on working through prayer. Again, how we want to put it all together, I'm not sure, but
it just struck me as, here's an example of how he does that.
and you can see with Moses too. How many times does Moses intercede for the people?
Yeah.
God's ready to destroy them all, and Moses intercedes for them. And he even says, I looked for, he's going to bring judgment on the people, and he says, I looked for a man who would intercede for them, and there was no man interceding for them. This people is going to be judged because there was no one interceding for them. And I think that's the urgent cry for us. It's like, you look at this generation of young people who are so confused and so it's a mess. They need us interceding for them. They need us pleading to God for them, even as Abraham is pleading for Lot, interceding for him.
Pastor, do you think people from the other side can plead for us?
Other side? What do you mean the other side?
People that have passed over, that are with God now. You just said that we're here as believers because someone prayed for us.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know who that could be, other than someone from the other side, from heaven.
No, well, actually, Jack, I would say there are there people that you pray for that have no idea that you prayed for them?
Yes.
Okay. I suspect it's the same for you, that there are perhaps people who, for whatever reason, you have no idea who they are. You'll find out in eternity, pleaded for you. Somewhere, somehow. God just does it. He works through prayer. And he doesn't really work apart from it. It's like he does this, especially for salvation. It's like, that's why the apostles, they devoted themselves to the word and to prayer, because they knew that's how this goes. People, no one gets saved without hearing the gospel. No one gets saved without having someone interceding for them, praying for them. And you see the apostles doing that, devoting themselves, word and prayer. That's how this goes.
And also you see throughout the Gospels how much Jesus prayed.
Yeah.
He would get up in the morning, early in the morning, to pray, to commune. And I think yes, God is sovereign, and he allows man to make decisions because it's free will. And sometimes we have to pay the consequences for those, but that's all in molding us to be more Christ-like.
Yeah.
Well, I think Jack was asking though, for somebody on the other side, somebody who's absent from the body, present with the
Yeah,
Lord.
yeah.
Can he, I don't know. My
Maybe,
answer,
why
to
not?
that, yeah,
Yeah, maybe.
I think that once you're in glory, though, while the prayers may cease, Jesus is still interceding for us.
Jesus
he
is
will always-
for us. Yeah.
He will always pray for us.
It wouldn't bother me to think that there are, like my father in heaven right now, my human father, that he might be praying for me. Maybe, I don't know.
Mm,
Doesn't say really other,
no.
what they're doing. But the commandment speaks to us.
Mm.
Those things beyond the pale are, that's what they're doing up there. I don't know.
Mhm.
But there's another thing about the power of intercession. Judas and Peter are both tempted by the evil one. If you remember what the difference between, why was Peter restored and Judas not?
well, Peter wept bitterly. He repented.
He did repent, but why did Peter repent? There's this very specific answer to that too, by the way. It's something that Jesus told Peter.
We had predicted that before the cock crows, you'll deny me 3 times. So he heard it.
Yes. And he
Mm.
said it in one of the, I think in the Gospel of John, he says, Simon, Satan has asked to sift you like wheat,
Right.
Mm.
but I have prayed for you.
Yeah.
And when you are restored, strengthen your brothers.
Yeah.
It was the intercession of Christ that saved him and brought him back.
You know what amazes me is 1 John tells us to pray according to the will of God.
Yeah.
So presumably, obviously, Christ prayed according to the will of God when he prayed for Peter. And lo and behold, Peter was restored. So they're showing that the will of God was, in fact, that Peter would be restored.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And by the way, go ahead, Teresa, I'm sorry.
Now Satan can no longer accuse us, right?
Absolutely, yeah. He will certainly slander us, falsely accuse us. But he has been kicked out of the courtroom, and so all he can do is try to make you feel guilty and so forth, and keep you from God. But no, he has been disarmed. He is a prosecuting attorney who's without a job now. He's been kicked out of the courts.
That's huge.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, the other part about I was going to say about intercession, talking about how we pray, Timothy, Paul and Timothy said in 1 Timothy 2, he says, I urge you then to pray for all sorts of people, for kings and all those in authority. And one of the reasons he says is because God desires that all should be saved. And so there is this, when we're praying for people's salvation, this is the kind of prayers that God is pleased about. We're not told, he doesn't say God wants all people to be physically healed, but he wants people to be saved. And so we are to intercede for people's salvation and to come before him that way. So, all right, let's come back to our text here. Let's go from here. Elizabeth, would you read for us here 27 to 29?
Sure. And Abraham went early in the morning to the place where he had stood before the Lord. And he looked down toward Sodom and Gomorrah and toward all the land of the valley. And he looked, and behold, the smoke of the land went up like the smoke of a furnace. So it was that when God destroyed the cities of the valley, God remembered Abraham and sent Lot out of the midst of the overthrow, when he overthrew the cities in which Lot had lived.
Yeah. All right. So now we return to Abraham, because this is really, this is like the bookends of the story. Sodom and Gomorrah happens with it. The story begins with Abraham, the Lord and the 2 angels visiting Abraham, and then going off and the Lord telling him his plans for Sodom. Abraham intercedes, and the Lord hears his prayer. The 2 angels go and bear witness, and they bring the judgment upon Sodom, and then he, out of answer to Abraham's prayer, brings out Lot and his family. And now we return to Abraham. Abraham goes back. He went early in the morning to the place where he stood before the Lord, and he looks down down upon the judgment upon the destruction of Sodom. But the point of the story was verse 29. When God destroyed the cities of the valley, what did he do?
Save Lot.
Abraham.
He remembered Abraham.
Yeah. He remembered Abe. Does that sound familiar to you?
Mm.
Remembered Abraham? Where have you heard that phrase before? When God brought judgment and remembered someone? You don't remember this? Ah. When was the last time we saw a judgment like this?
Mm.
The flood.
Yeah,
Oh,
the
no.
flood.
Noah.
Just, and it says exactly the same way. God sends the flood, and then after the flood has destroyed the city, it said, and God remembered Noah. And then he begins to subside the flood and bring about the new heavens and the new earth, just like he remembered Noah. And so this is this is a story not just of judgment, it's a story of mercy and grace and salvation. That's the story of Sodom. It's not just a judgment story. It's a story of salvation. God saved Lot and his daughters from his wrath because he remembered Abraham, the covenant he made with him, and the grace that he showed him. This is a story of judgment and grace, just like the flood.
Mm.
Okay.
Pastor, in the past, you've told us about when he remembered someone of something, and it's not like, oh, I forgot, I just remembered.
Yeah.
What is your interpretation of it?
Yeah, thanks. Remembering is to how should we say this? This is when God
Completes it
begins
for
to act upon a promise. And so the promise sort of was that moment of intercession just a few days earlier when Abraham pleaded for Lot's salvation. God remembered Abraham, and that's why he grabbed Lot and his daughters when they should have been destroyed. It should have been just a warning, get out of here. I'm giving you a warning. Look, if you want to die, you die, but you got to get out of here. And they're lingering, but he keeps his promise to Abraham and pulls him out. And so that's the remembrance, is when God begins to act upon a promise that he made. And so he remembered. So he said something, and then when he's about to act upon it, it says he remembered, and he does it. So, all right. Well, let's pick up now one more. Let's come back to Lot. This is our final word of Lot here. Tough ending for this poor guy here. Let's take a look at our next story here, verses 30. Rob Roy, you want to get this for us here? Let me find it. I lost my place. Genesis 19:30. Let's do the paragraph 30 to 30. Well, I'll do the whole thing. Get it all over with. 30 down to 38.
Okay. 30 down to 38.
Yeah.
Now Lot went up out of Zoar and lived in the hills with his daughters, for he was afraid to live in Zoar. So he lived in a cave with his two daughters. And the firstborn said to the younger, our father is old, and there is not a man on earth to come in to us after the manner of all the earth. Come, let us make our father drink wine, and we will lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine that night, and the firstborn went in and lay with her father. He did not know when she lay down or when she rose. The next day, the firstborn said to the younger, behold, I lay last night with my father. Let us make him drink wine tonight also. Then you go in and lie with him, that we may preserve offspring from our father. So they made their father drink wine and that night also. And the younger arose and lay with him, and he did not know when she lay down or when she arose. Thus both the daughters of Lot became pregnant by their father. The firstborn bore a son and called his name Moab. He is the father of the Moabites to this day. The younger also bore a son and called his name Ben-Ami. He is the father of the Ammonites to this day.
Okay, all right. So, I will start with Zoar. So Lot and his daughters, his two daughters. I don't think we ever know their names, do we? Are in Zoar. It's a small city that he had asked out. Now remember, Zoar, if I remember correctly, didn't the angels say basically that he was going to destroy Zoar also? But because of Lot, he withheld judgment. If we go back a little bit, when Lot had asked about Zoar, he says, behold, this city is near enough to flee to, verse 20. It's a little one. Let me escape there. It's not a little one. And he said, behold, I grant you this favor also, that I will not overthrow the city of which you have spoken. So it seems like Zoar was as wicked as Sodom and Gomorrah and would have shared in that destruction. It wasn't just one city. Sodom was the focus of it, but Gomorrah was a sister city there. And apparently Zoar might have been included in this judgment, but because Lot wants to escape there, he's going to preserve that city. So that's kind of an interesting tidbit. Yeah.
I was going to say in last week's message, you had said you didn't know what Zoa meant. So I had to look it up, and there was two meanings. One was little, and the other one was a place of refuge or sanctuary.
Oh, interesting.
So I just thought it was interesting that he's being brought into a refuge, and then he leaves it.
He leaves it. Why does he leave it?
Because he's afraid to live there. He's afraid of the people.
Yeah, he is afraid. Probably because, think about it now. Why is he afraid?
Because the people of Zoar are relatives, so to speak, to Sodom, as you were just saying. So they're afraid that the same punishment will come on them, that Lot is bringing it on to Sodom, and therefore will bring it on to Zoar.
Well, they're not afraid. He's afraid. He's
Right.
afraid to live in Zoar. And
That people are afraid and will do something to Lot to get him out of there because they're afraid of getting the same treatment.
yeah, if you think about this here, we'd say remember the wickedness of Sodom it wasn't just that they were wanting to rape these guys, but that these guys were visitors to them. They were strangers among them. And Lot now is the stranger among the people of Zoar, because the people share in the evil of Sodom, and Lot and his daughters are strangers among them. And so they're vulnerable to them. And again, when you do not want to be vulnerable among wicked people, target them. In fact, I remember when I was living in Houston as a single guy, and it was a particularly bad part of town, and I lived in a bad neighborhood, but I had an apartment complex there. And when I left my car, I would walk to my apartment like I was furious and angry and mad, because I wanted to, because I knew that if there's someone looking to jump me, they're not going to jump someone who's having a bad day. They're going to target the weak one, the one who looks afraid and vulnerable. They're not going to target someone who's storming to his room. And so that's the thing, is that Lot is vulnerable here. He's with his two daughters. He's an older guy, and he's with his two daughters, and they're vulnerable, and they're in a wicked place. And so he's fearful, and what does he end up doing?
Going to the hills.
He goes to the hill, which is where the angels told him to go in the first place. Okay.
Plus,
Are
we'll
there
think
any
we have-
maps? Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Claudette.
Are there any, did Sodom and Gomorrah and Zoar, do they show up on any old maps? I mean, sometimes he'll say, we don't know where those
Yeah.
places are.
Yeah, we don't. I think the sense is that they're all around the Dead Sea area.
Okay.
I don't know. I don't think I've never seen a specific map that kind of labels exactly where they were. But that might be something to look into.
Look for a place that's covered in salt.
Yeah. Yeah. He lives in a cave now with his two daughters. All right. So now we have this incident here. Okay. What's going on here? Let's talk about the motivation. This is a great scandal. The two daughters, basically, what do? Let's go through it.
They seduced their father when he's drunk.
Okay, so first, yeah, so step one is get their father drunk. And then what?
Lay with them.
They lay with him.
Have a child with them.
And they get pregnant. Okay. And Lot has no idea any of this happened. Okay. All right. Now, why is this story told here? This story should remind you of something. You're going to notice patterns in the book of Genesis. Does this remind you of another story we've already read about?
Ham?
Yeah. It's a reminder of Noah. What happened to Noah after the flood? Remember?
Got drunk.
He planted a vineyard, he got drunk and was exposed in his tent. And then his son, Ham, does something shameful. And his grandson from Ham is what?
Canaan?
Canaan is cursed. We have this pattern. So we have one who has been spared from judgment and then is in a vulnerable state, is drunk and is passed out, and he is taken advantage of, or he's in some way exposed or humiliated. Something shameful has happened. And when he comes to his senses, it's the son of his son that is, in a sense, cursed. And Canaan becomes a nation, becomes the whole wicked land that Abraham is living in. It's this shameful beginnings, this cursed beginnings. Now you have, what is the result? What's the point of the story? Why do we need to know this story? Well, how does it conclude?
I would believe it's because the girls were influenced by the actions of the people of Sodom and went through with this, and that their children become cursed.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but why
These are all historic enemies of Israel.
Yeah, Moab and Ammon. This is the beginning of the Moabites and the Ammonites. Before we get to what's the motivation? Why do the daughters do such a thing?
To pass on the father's name.
I want to be clear about this. It is not sexual perversity.
Mhm.
They're not doing it because they're perverse, people this way. It is, their conclusion is, do they want to do this?
No, they think kind of like God is going to screw up. We better help him out. It's kind of like Abraham taking up that woman and having a kid.
Hagar.
Yeah, exactly, right. Look, there are, basically he says to them, there is not a man on earth to come into us except the man of all the earth. There are no men where they are. And they will, they are in a fearful place. Because what happens when their father dies?
They have nothing.
They will be unprotected. You don't understand the importance of a man for a household at this time. It's not like today where a woman can go off and make a living and provide and can even be a single mother and things like that. No, it's like they're completely unprotected and vulnerable in a wicked world. And out of desperation, they do the unthinkable. They do same thing what we saw back with Lot. It's interesting, there's a little bit of a tit for tat here. Lot, in a desperate situation, does the unthinkable and offers his daughters to the mob. His daughters, in a desperate, wicked situation, do the unthinkable and sleep with their father and get pregnant by him. So there's a lot of kind of sort of irony or just a poetry almost in the way that it's described to us. They do the unthinkable for us. And the result is, it's really an interesting thing, is we have the birth of two nations, Moab and Ammon. And Moab and Ammon are interesting because, on the one hand, as you said, Rob, they are enemies. They are, like Canaan, they are cursed enemies of Israel. However, on the other hand, something good does come from Moab.
Ruth,
Ruth, Naomi.
Ruth.
Ruth.
From Moab. In the line of the Messiah too. So it's really interesting. It's not such a neat thing. He's the good guys, he's the bad guys. There's this cursed beginnings of it, and yet God has a redemptive plan in the midst of it. It's messy. This is absolutely messy. And so you kind of read these stories and you're just like, ugh. I mean, I feel like I need to take a shower after I read chapter 19 of Genesis. It's just defiling. I mean, the stories are just, but that's the point of it. They really teach and help us to see in a small scale the depravity of mankind, the curse, the fall, the wretched condition. We come out of this and we say, what a wretched man I am. Who will save us? And then built into the stories of depravity is stories of grace. We have God hearing and saving Lot from judgment. And then even Lot taking a cursed situation like these two nations and bringing salvation through it as well. It's really a fascinating take. And again, further reason why I'm so convinced of the truth of Scripture. Because what nation writes these stories about themselves? What people, highlight these shameful scenes? I can't think of anything more shameful than what we've just witnessed in Genesis 19. And so, but it's truth. It is truth. And it points us away from ourselves and saying, God, you have to save us. We are a mess. We're an absolute mess. And we need a savior.
And it just keeps on repeating and repeating and repeating. It's like we never learned.
Yeah. Isn't it amazing? This is another cycle. So we had the cycle of Adam and Eve in the garden, taking the fruit that's forbidden of them, and the curse coming upon them, and then their offspring ending up in murder and shame and bloodshed. Then you have Noah and him being spared, the new creation, but again, a fall for him. And then the shame and the curse that comes from that. And now we have it again with Lot and Sodom. And so there we go.
We have, other than there being mentioned in scripture later on, Lot being mentioned here and there, and his wife. I can't remember. Are there ever any other stories? Is he mentioned again in and around the time of Abraham in Genesis? Or is he kind of like out of the picture?
I think this is the last we see of Lot. I'm pretty sure that this is the end of Lot's story. We're not told of when he dies, as far as I know. This is just, it kind of sets us up. It sort of lays down. So we're going to come across Moab and Ammon again. And especially when they come out of the out of Egypt, and they come into the promised land. They have to go through Moab, and you remember that's where the Balaam and Balak encounter them. You have that whole thing. So yeah, and they're a mixed bunch. They really are. They're connected. It's going to be like the Edomites too with Esau. When we get to the story of Esau. They're all kind of connected, and so there's grace in these veins here, but it's a lot of mess too. So, yeah. All right. Well, we'll break it here.
Yeah, I just have one quick question. Going back to Noah when he got drunk, it said his son Ham did something shameful. Now, I'll have to go back and read the account. I thought that he saw his father exposed and covered him up. So
No,
how would that be
Ham,
shameful?
no. Ham didn't do that. Ham
Oh, he didn't.
saw his father's nakedness and told his brothers.
Oh, okay.
So and his father was not outside naked. His father was in his tent naked.
Right.
And Ham plays the part of the evil of the devil, who
Okay.
exposes him and humiliates him. And it's his
Oh.
brothers Shem and Japheth who take the blanket and walk backwards. So they don't even look upon him and cover him. And that's why Shem is blessed. Shem plays the
Oh.
part of Christ. Who
Okay.
covers our shame.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's the thing, is like Ham is like, some people say that Ham must have done something sexual. I'm like, no.
No.
He didn't. He played the part of the devil, the accuser, who loves to humiliate us and expose us. The
Okay.
devil is not a pervert. The devil is a Pharisee. The devil is the one who's self-righteous and stands condemning us. That's what the devil is. And that's what Ham plays the part of.
Okay. That makes sense. Yeah. Thank you.
Very good. All right, we'll stop recording.